Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, and a very special guest today in Nick Diani. Before we get into our chatter here, we just want to say thank you all for the support. Subscribe and like the video. Follow us at That Milan podcast everywhere, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, every other place that you consume your content. So we greatly appreciate all of you. Spotify and Apple as well for the podcast. So give us 5 stars over there. We are right around the holidays here in the US, so that means it's a lot of fun to watch. One of the more underrated things, I know you guys will agree with me on this, is watching European football on Thursday along with the NFL. It is very much an underrated day in, I think, sports over here, because I know the three of us appreciate the NFL, and then on top of that, so I just think that's a lot of fun.
I think
But Matt,
a couple years, not to cut you off, but I remember I had a pretty clear memory of I think it was probably 2017, 2018. I remember when we got a bunch of new players and Montella was the coach, and Thanksgiving's on a Thursday, and I think we played
Gravenis,
or some crazy
team. They had Sticky FC on the back.
Yeah, and that was on a Thursday, and it was raining on the game during the game, and I was like, yeah, good luck trying for me to sell the main screen TV having this on during Thursday football games. It was funny, but it was me kind of watching it, and everyone was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, no, don't worry about it."
Nick, welcome back once again. Pleasure to have you, obviously, from the Kicks and Picks pod, which is a weekly occurrence, the best soccer betting podcast, along with the Plus Money pod. Good friends of the program. So how you doing, brother?
Doing good, guys. Appreciate you having me back as always. Congratulations on success. I guess we're third of the way through the season. So
crazy.
Is it right? Yeah, you're right.
I joke about this on Kicks and Picks all the time. I feel like I've almost turned into a Milan fan because I don't think anybody bets on them as much as I do.
Dude, yeah. I was going to bring that up this episode.
I'm taking Milan all the time. I'm betting on their games.
It's a perfect segue into this, because our last conversation, or one of our last main conversations, was you had us in this one. I think you took Double Chance, correct? Or if I'm wrong. Yeah. So Milan, huge underdogs in this one. Genuinely. Plus 300. I was a coward. I didn't do it. I thought draw all day. I bet the draw. Probably should have been, but Hakan coward up at the spot, so I'm not complaining. But yeah, we want your thoughts, Nick, on this. Dude, 6 straight defeats to them. They win the 20th on our head, and then they go 6 straight unbeaten. It's just honestly one of the funniest things I've ever seen in Derby history, or just really sports history as far as rivalries go. I've never seen such a flip like this. Probably, I know this is niche and us can understand it, especially Matt. This was really like when the Red Sox just won 4 straight against the Yanks after being down 3-0. Obviously, ended with World Series for the Red Sox. Milan are just in second or third place for now. But just the entire mentality shift. Nick, what do you see from Milan in particular? Because this isn't solely tactics. This is missing chances. This is missing penalties, choking leads like they did in the Super Coppa. What did you see as sort of an outsider from both of these clubs?
I'm going to take it back a couple years ago when Milan won the Scudetto, and Martino, you were actually on to preview the game. It was in February, the Derby, and Inter had a sizable lead, I think, in the Scudetto race. Milan wins that game. I think they came from behind, if I'm not mistaken.
They were down 1-0, yeah.
And I feel like ever since that, it's been Milan's Derby. And that's the type of thing you kind of have to take into account when you're betting, right? You could look at form. You could look at who do you think has a better roster. I know you and I saw a lot of discourse on Twitter and social media. I'm like, oh, who's the favorite? What does the roster mean? The game's not played on paper, this, that, and the other thing. Inter were quite literally the favorites. When I say they're the favorites, I mean, the odds are there.
That's what we talk about. That's where it's derived from. Yes,
if you are the favorite, you're the favorite, right? That's not up for debate. But this Milan roster currently, I feel like is very underrated, very undervalued. I think there was nowhere for them to go but up. And I think they're just in Inter's head, like I said, since that game. I mean, it's really been all Milan. And
Well,
outside
with
of Allegri there, I just think tactically there was no doubt he was going to do what was needed to be done to get this result, no matter what it looked like. And it looked like an Allegri win, right? 1-0. You weathered the storm. I'm not going to say Inter had great chances other than the penalty. I mean, was there ever really a moment where you guys felt like that one post that they hit?
Yeah, I would say this real quick too before people roast you in the comments. We did lose 6 straight after that comeback win in the Derby, so they will roast you for that.
No,
but I know what you mean.
Like it's been
I know what you mean though. I know what you mean because Inter were clearly the better side in those, and Pioli was just like clueless. Matt, you go ahead and answer those chances. I think they were really well taken chances by Inter. They weren't clear-cut chances. Like Lautaro hit it well on that save. Thuram getting that header off was really impressive. But were they like, oh my God, like how did he miss that type of chances? I don't really think there were any of those. Matt, what did you think?
No, I mean, I think you could look at it a couple different ways. And obviously people are going to look at the stats, and the stats all leaned heavily towards Inter having, the dominant game and the clear-cut chances, the couple attempts off the post. And when you see a goalkeeper like Maignan called into action so early, so frequently, people are like, well, Inter had the clear-cut chances. They dominated the game. And I think to an extent you can say that, and I would agree. But I think the Thuram header was some lovely ingenuity by him to even get into the position to get a glancing header on it, and it forced Mike Maignan to make a great save. But it was one of those things where it was kind of like something out of like nothing. It wasn't so much, hey, Inter was springing forward. And Milan looked like they were kind of disorganized and all over the place defensively, and they were completely dominated in that sense. I thought the game was kind of like a typical derby where Inter's going to have their chances. They're going to get those moments. They're a great team. They have strong players in the attack. Same thing on Milan. When Milan had their opportunities, granted very, very limited opportunities because you look at the stats and you look at possession, when Milan tried to play forward, it was kind of the typical Milan way of doing things under Allegri, counterattacking. And as soon as they were able to win those balls in the midfield, I know Sharma, shout out to Sharma, he's obviously a mega Inter fan and great creator. He kind of highlighted how that goal from Pulisic happened. It came from the midfield. Inter had the ball. They one bad touch. Fofana cleans it up, springs forward, and here Milan are off running. And there were 2 other instances where Milan probably could have at least had a better attempt on goal. There was one with Leao who you received the ball wide from Pulisic after a counter, so kind of let him underway. And then there was the one in the second half where Leao was going on the opposite end. It was like a 1v2, tried to play to Pulisic, and he couldn't quite link up. So like both teams had their chances. I think the stats are going to probably tell a different story for some, but I think I think Nick he's pretty spot on as far as the way he saw the game.
If you watch the game, right, that's the beauty of watching.
Yeah.
And obviously talking about the games, betting on the games, you can't tell what's what from a stat sheet. You just can't. It's not like any other sport in that regard. And yeah, I do apologize. I'm thinking about like good. Milan has won 5 straight. I forgot how many times you guys just come up against each other in a given season.
Like six unbeaten. There was the only draw in the league last year where De Vrij scored in like the 96th minute.
I've probably blocked out 5 of those games between the game I was talking about.
We tried to as well. So Milan fans try to talk those out.
You know what? Just to put a bow on what you asked me, I think, and I talked to you guys about it a lot. I'm very harsh on him, but the reemergence of Leao in this starting 11 really has kind of opened up a lot for Milan. I think that's made a huge difference. And like you said, where there's some chances, some passes missed, sure, but having him on the field, I don't think there's a comparison to what else is available.
I think he's a classic case of fans are less scared of him than the players are. The players are like terrified. Like usually like there's some players you're just like, it's a consensus between the players and the fans that they're both terrified of the guy. And there have been players like that in this matchup. It really feels like Leao is one of those players that a lot of fans don't rate as much as the opposing players do. Because every time you've seen him, and this was a difficult one, like they had a double and triple team him because they know that the second that he gets into space, and there was really only one opportunity that he had where he was ball carrying, that he either got a good outlet pass for it, that he was able to carry the ball. And it ironically was him against Akanji, and Akanji stopped him. And I was so hoping that he wouldn't, because of the pregame quote that Akanji had saying, "I'll show you how to defend him 1v1." And he did, to be fair, on the one opportunity that he got. But I think it opens up plenty of things for Pulisic, which is very funny because he is an incredibly underrated finisher. And I think we see it more and more, his poaching ability on that. But you were right, Matt. It's Fofana and Saelemaekers, and Schumer broke it down in the video. It's the perfect type of shot. Even Buffon discussed it on the post-match, saying those are very tricky because when you're trying to parry that as a goalkeeper, you really have to be powerful with it. Because Sommer, much like I believe it was Oliver Kahn in the 2002 World Cup final, where it was just a bad spill, man. At that point, where you rather just him hit it over or concede a corner at that point, because that is one of the worst things that you could do as a goalkeeper, is spill that. And for Sommer, it's been a lot of mistakes for him in Inter this year. He cost them the Juve game. He cost them the Derby. So there's a lot of pressure there. And unfortunately for Josep Martinez, he's in a really tough headspace after the tragedy that he was a part of, where he accidentally struck somebody and killed them. It's really weird for Inter to go somewhere. And just like a final question I have for you, Nick, and then Matt, you could obviously answer this as well. There's a big game complex with Inter now. They're losing a lot of big games. I wonder how much psychologically that Champions League final has impacted them, because there's different ways to bounce back from tragic losses, right? Milan did it in the mid-2000s. They came back. We saw Bayern do it after losing in stoppage time to United. Inter, there's opposite ends of it. Teams could spiral. Do these sort of games, do you think, bring back up those scars? Because it's a mental beatdown for them, even regardless of their quality. That has to weigh on them somewhat. Like, do you agree with that, Nick?
I absolutely agree with it, and it's largely the same team. That's really where the issue is. They haven't made wholesale changes, and you don't want to make wholesale changes from a team that makes the Champions League final, right? I understand that. Right. But they're not getting any younger. The defense is still old. Cherby, De Vrij are guys that are relied on game in and game out. Hakan and Mkhitaryan, I know he's featuring a little bit less since Sucic has been very, very good.
Yeah,
but,
he's talented. Good
the encapsulation of what you just asked me, Barella is like the guy for me. Like, when has he had a big game ever? I'm trying to remember a game that I relied on this guy to be the guy, to be noticeable, to be everywhere, to pop up and get the goal or create the play. And what did he do this game? I don't remember his name being called once.
Ironically, I think it was one of his better derbies in a little bit. That's how
maybe that's good, right? Maybe he didn't make any mistakes, or he was unnoticeable. But obviously, Milan didn't get a lot going in the midfield early on.
He's not.
But when is he going to be the guy that you can rely on in a must-win game? I haven't seen that from him, and that's to that point the whole team.
Matt, what do you? Really the only one, I was just talking about players that you're terrified of. The only one that really scared me a lot from Inter in recent years is just Thuram. Lautaro doesn't have that same sort of sauce anymore after Pioli left to me. Where do you kind of stand in line with all that before?
Yeah, I mean, this is more like a general sentiment or feeling towards Inter. I think that, look, the team that they currently have is very similar to the one that, has been making regular deep runs in the Champions League. And, to Nick's point, you don't expect to make widespread, like, sweeping changes because, like, it's not easy to replace a team that just got to a Champions League final. Like, that's where you want to be. But I thought that after this Champions League final that they lost, especially in the fashion they did, I thought that had to be the sort of result that shifted them towards, okay, like, we have to actually make the changes now versus trying to do like patchwork, right? They sold Pavard, but then they get a Kanji, like similar age, fee was kind of similar, and then they're still trotting out the same sort of players, and those players are still playing like very focal roles. And the age is showing. Granted, they're good players. They can look good and get disguised their limitations on a regular match day against Sassuolo on clean sheet. But when you go and play these high leverage games in the Champions League, domestically against the Napoli's, Milans, Juventus, etc., that's where you're starting to see that the margins are closing that were once there between them and they're contemporaries. So I looked at the way this team is built in this past summer, and I think that's been what's really done them in, because I like some players individually in their team, but especially some of the older players, like I still like an Iturbi, I still like certain guys of that age, but I think there has to be that sort of like regression as far as how much they're held to a high standard and expectation to deliver on a weekly basis, right? This is pretty much the same team we've seen for the better part of 3-4 years. And
Even
when you
longer,
constantly fall short on those big Champions League finals, and even obviously recently against Milan in the derbies, it begs the question, like, okay, like if not now, when are we going to make the changes? Otherwise, you guys have seen it. Like, you can't make 7-8 drastic changes in a given summer. It's very difficult. You have to kind of spread that out over multiple markets and
Right.
kind of address it that way.
Yeah, I think there's like a couple center backs within their squad. De Vrij, Bisek, Acerbi, all could be gone after this season. Hakan, it's really coming to the conversation of, are we letting these guys retire with Inter, or are we selling now at a point where you could still get some value? I don't remember if Hakan extended his contract, but there were those links with Bayern for a little bit. And then obviously I think they should move on from Lautaro. I think that, you know, if Julian Alvarez is going to be moving on from Atletico eventually, because it kind of sounds like there's a weird dynamic there. Lautaro to Atletico just feels like a match made in heaven.
I hope they don't get him, but yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, I hope Inter don't get.
No, not them getting Julian Alvarez. Him leaving. They're not going to be able to afford Julian Alvarez.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible. I just mean like them selling Lautaro, maybe, you know, moving forward with Pio, Thuram, and Boni. I think that would make more sense, and you reallocate some of that money, invest in another player. But yeah, it's going to be weird transitionally for Inter, where their core is right now. So moving on, for the main reason why we have our good friend Nick on is his beloved club Lazio, and how they've been handling turbulent times. Absolutely bizarre situation, nothing short of chaos with that club. Sarri coming back, almost basically threatening to retire after finding out that he was lied to about what was going to be available on the transfer market. Typical Lotito fashion of not really selling to buy, which is really their kind of only option to push further because he's not investing capital. Club doesn't really make money. Welcome to Italy.
Yeah.
But yet, results have been pretty respectable.
Been okay.
Managing decently. No true striker on your squad. I know you and I have talked about that. I think that's where you're severely lacking. Obviously, really hard to replace someone like Ciro Immobile. Rovella's been out injured. Mario Gila, I believe, just doesn't look like he's going to be staying there long term. Sarri is doing what he can with what he's got. I know you're not the biggest fan of him, Nick, but where have you kind of judged Lazio so far this season? Are you satisfied as much as you can be given the situation? I thought you've managed well so far. How much more could you really ask from Lazio is my main question.
Yeah, I don't even know why you needed me on today, because everything you said was absolutely correct. I don't know that I could have put it any better. I think my biggest frustration in your welcome to Italy point is a lot of it is bureaucratic. Some of it's self-inflicted. You haven't had a shirt sponsor in like 10 years, 12 years. What's the excuse for that? You can't scrape a couple million together from a company to get somebody.
ADL basically invented his own company.
So that part is a little insane to me. Yeah. You mentioned Sarri. My issue with bringing him back is you wasted 3 years now. You've wasted 2.5 years or 1.5 years when you moved on from him, brought in Baroni, and then got rid of him. So if you were going to do all that just to bring Sarri back, that's a waste of a year and a half. Yeah. A team like Lazio does not have that time to waste. You need some sort of European football. You need to get any sort of money that you can. I don't even care if it's the Conference League.
I agree.
And that's what they've given up this year, right? So that's really the frustration. I would have much more loved to bring in a guy like Palladino, who had just been let go by Fiorentina, start a new project. But to your point, they couldn't start a new project because they couldn't bring any players. So the answer to your original question is, how are they doing? What's my expectation? Considering they were able to make 0 moves, I think I'm pleasantly surprised. 5 wins out of 12 is not bad. They did have a win over Juve, which, I mean, I guess everybody was beating Juve around that time, but I will still take it. That's a season winner for me right there. But but still a couple of tough losses to teams that you shouldn't be losing to. Sassuolo is inexcusable. I think we've been shut out 5 or 6 times. That's kind of inexcusable. But there's a couple of players who have taken really big steps that I didn't think were possible because they didn't do it the first time when Saudi was around. Isaacson, I thought it's been really, really good over there on the right wing. Toma Basic has been probably our best player this season in the midfield. This is a guy who didn't play a game in like 2 years. He got loaned out for a while. So two bright spots there. But if you tell me, hey, Lazio is going to be top half of the table, if they're going to compete for 7th place, I think I'm okay with that. I don't know if they can, but I think they're better than the teams that are below them. I don't know if they have enough sauce to compete with Como or Juve, with this roster.
Bologna's of the world. We'll see if, Atalanta rebound under Palladino, I think is sort of a bigger question. There's been links of Guendouzi going to the Premier League. There's no way in hell Elotito would sell him mid-season to the Prem. They would have to have a ridiculous offer. This is a guy who proudly boasts about rejecting one of the dumbest deals I've ever seen rejected with Milinkovic-Savic to Milan years ago. We all know how he operates. He's one of the more perplexed. I think he is the poster boy for what the problem with Italy is as far as ownership and maneuvering within the market goes. But yeah, heading into this one, Matt, this one is going to be, it's really 2 fixtures, guys, back to back. We play you Coppa Italia on Thursday, December 4th, but the big one in Serie A is Saturday, November 29th. Again, this one will be in Rome. And this one's at San Siro, sorry, because I keep forgetting that. We literally just played Inter away. And then the Olimpico for Coppa Italia. This is going to be interesting to see how Allegri juggles this. Santi Menez is likely not to be playing within this. We just had reports this morning that Pulisic has some muscle fatigue. And then there is Alexis Saelemaekers who has some discomfort. We're still 3 days away from this fixture for Serie A. How do you think Allegri would handle this? Isn't it Nkunku and Leao playing this one and also rest them in Coppa Italia? Does he kind of sort of push the issue to pick up another 3 points? Because Milan have had great results against top sides. And then not to say that Lazio isn't sort of in that conversation with the better sides in Serie A, but Milan have been dropping points against sides that they should be winning against. How do you think Allegri handles this? Because I don't see him playing like Modric and the Stars in the Coppa Italia fixture.
No, I mean, Modric has played pretty much the entire 90 for every single match, right? I think with the exception of 1 or 2, and he's played like 78 to 80 of those minutes in those games. So I think he's obviously going to prioritize Modric and his usage in Serie A, which is obviously understandable. But you mentioned, what was happening with Pulisic and the status of Saelemaekers as well. I had 2 players that I thought had pretty good Derby performances. I think that, we're going to have to see Nkunku at some point over these next 2 games, right? And I am asking myself, if we can't confidently start Christopher Nkunku, a guy we paid upwards of 40 million for now, with all the injuries that we've had, when can you have any semblance of confidence to play him? Like, these are the games where if Nkunku wants to prove that he can make the impact at Milan, and management who brought him in for such a sizable figure want to prove that they were smart in doing so by bringing him over from Chelsea despite his injury concerns and his declining form, these are the games that are proper showcases for that. So I've already made my points very clear about Nkunku. I like the player, just not how he will fit within this entire scheme under Allegri. And I remain firm on that stance until proven otherwise. But I think, juggling both these competitions is obviously going to be a challenge for Allegri. But that is the advantage, I guess, of not being in the Champions League, because you can kind of approach this in a way where, let's say you did have Champions League fixtures. Now it's a whole broader conversation, right, as to which one to prioritize, because now it's like a pecking order. I think it's pretty clear Coppa Italia, Serie A is a priority, right? Ask any Milan fan, hey, if you had to choose one of the 2 games to get a win in, it's Serie A over Coppa Italia. Yeah. As much as they want to win trophies, as much as we've been harping on saying that if it's a trophy there to be won for Milan, we as Milan fans, as a fan base for a big club, should want to win these trophies. But I think Allegri is going to do some rotation. I think you'll see a Stupinian maybe play in the Coppa Italia game. I think he's going to ride the hot hand of Bartosaghi in the Serie A game because I think he's fully deserving of it, and I think you'll see much of the same from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, so the Saelemaekers situation is interesting, guys, because his backup, if you want to call him that, Athakame, won't be available for a little bit. They're saying close to a month. So even the guy who's struggled somehow scored a wonder goal as well.
Formation change? Or do we maybe see Connie De Winter play?
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to get to, of like, what are their options at that position? Does Allegri offer flexibility in terms of another formation instead of forcing these wingbacks in? But that's really the ultimate question. I wouldn't even be shocked if it's actually Tomori as the wingback due to his athleticism, and then De Winter sort of stays back. That could be a possibility, but this is also why I didn't really love the addition or lack of addition of a experienced center back on top of all these other players, because we see now one or two guys missing on that back line. You're sort of scrambling to find replacements in that area. But as far as the rest goes, like, Milan have enough. Where does Arden Yashari fit into this picture as well? I think him and Richie will probably likely start or get significant minutes, at least in Coppa Italia. How does, with the inverse on this, Nick, how does Lazio approach this? Because this is pretty big for them. Do they want to attempt to get anywhere near a trophy within this? It always feels like we play you in Coppa Italia, by the way. It's pretty insane. Yeah, like, how do you approach this is the ultimate question here. I mean, it feels like you're happy to get a draw in a way in Serie A, which also notoriously you guys are horrendous in that stadium. I can only recollect the one time, it would have been 2017, 2018 when you guys won on our home field. So, yeah, how are you on the inverse with this? How are you seeing Lazio and Sarri approach this? Because Sarri notoriously not the greatest with the rotations as well.
You put that very nicely to Sarri. No, listen, I think if you asked me, gun to my head, I would much rather win the Coppa Italia game. Obviously, it's any chance to get a trophy.
I hear you
for any team, and it was nice and refreshing to hear you guys say it as well, because I know I'm coming from a smaller club, right? So any chance to get silverware, you have to take it. But it's nice to hear.
Roma fans, this is how you do things.
No, a lot of it's only the big club fans of the big clubs only scoff at trophies when they haven't won it, right? So
yeah.
I appreciate where your guys' heads are at for sure, but no, the rotation is just not going to be there. It's more of a function of the squad that's available, right? I think Sarri has pretty much settled into an 11 that he likes. Provedel, I'm not his biggest fan. I don't think he's been good for the past 2 years, but he did something in training to earn his starting spot. I imagine he starts in the Serie A fixture, and we might see Mandas in Coppa Italia, but the center of the midfield is going to be the biggest issue for us. Cataldi did come off injured last game. I don't know if he's going to be fit, certainly for 2 games in a week. Vecino probably has to slide in because Rovella is also out. So that's going to be a big opportunity, I think, for Milan to attack. And outside of that, I think the question comes down to striker, right? Isaacson has been great. Zaccagni isn't going to lose his starting spot. There's nobody to take it. So what are we doing in the middle? Is it Dia? Does Pedro get a look? Does Naslin maybe get a look? He's been good off of the bench. Those are the only question marks for me. I think other than that, you're going to see a very similar 4-3-3 for 2 of these games.
Yeah, and on top of your scoring issues with the way Milan has been defensively, I think the midfield battle is just going to be that difficult for Lazio in this.
Definitely.
I think Rovella is a huge game changer. He was really fantastic for large parts of last season. I thought he made one of the bigger jumps for Italian midfield talents, if you want to consider him a talent. Anything under 25 in Italy is a talent to me. But yeah, I think that is probably the biggest dynamic issue here, right, Matt? I would assume Modric starts in Serie A. It's still been a good 6-day rest for him. You rest him against Lazio, maybe come off of the bench in the Coppa Italia fixture. What do you kind of see with Milan's midfield in this? It just feels like, once again, it'll be Rabiot, Modric, and obviously Fofana for those.
It ain't broke.
Yeah, exactly. And then it really depends on Pulisic here. So we'll see what happens. I would definitely see Leao. Leao plays so well against the Roma teams. I think he just always does a really good job. I'll never forget the one time where, I know you guys remember this Coppa Italia fixture where Leao very obviously tried sending in a cross, but then he ended up scoring it because he hit the post and it went in. So yeah, I think this is potentially one of those matches where it could be Leao's playground in Serie A. Because if you get him on the counter, he's just so terrifying. I think this is like his been vintage version of him. So what do you kind of view this being like, Matt? Because Rabiot, again, I think someone made the point real quick before you go. They've only conceded 1 goal in the matches that he started in, and that was the Kevin De Bruyne penalty. So he's introduced a completely different dynamic to this team. Do you see more of the same?
Well, I mean, speaking on the defensive side, I think, you touched on Leao and his success against the Roman teams. But I think that Lazio, I mean, you look at the stats, right? I know we talked about off the top, stats don't really tell you everything, but loud goals scored, right? That's kind of the name of the game, right? That often tells a lot. And Lazio have only conceded 9 in 12 games. So this is a team that, for all their issues when it comes to drumming up chances and to, maybe playing the consistent brand of football they want for one reason or the other, a team that doesn't really concede a lot on the other side. Like, I think they're happy to go into a game like this and to play with the way that they're probably forced to play because of the fact they didn't have an abundance of market additions. 9 goals conceded in 12 games is a pretty good record. And it's not like, to your, earlier point about Gia coming and performing in this group, Romagnoli, you have Pellegrini, like a lot of the same guys, and they're still getting some pretty decent results from a defensive standpoint. So I don't know if the space is going to entirely be there. I know, granted, Milan have been playing pretty well from an attacking sense. They've gotten really good production from their forward players, not named Santi Jimenez. But I think, going into this game, I don't think it's going to be as easy as one would believe, or one would hope to believe from a Milan point of view, because I think that you're going to look at form, you're going to look at all the things kind of factored in here and say, well, Milan should handle Lazio, no problem. But I do think there is some sort of psychological component when it comes to these teams, because I feel like these games, that regardless of form of the two teams heading into the game, I always feel some sort of like cautious optimism, because I think Lazio can pull something out of nothing. Like Zaccagni, I could see him getting like a curled effort, getting like a equalizer and kind of stealing a point in this game, like something like that, because they do have those individual moments in them, in my opinion.
Crazy thing about Milan games is their draws feel like losses.
Yeah.
Because of the teams that you guys drew to, right? So,
and how they did it. Yeah.
The letdown is real. I think they should be firmly in first place, but you mentioned the stats, right? There's only 5 teams that have given up less than 10 goals so far this year, and Lazio is one of them. That's wild to me. If you look at the goal splits, right? Same amount of goals scored as Roma, same amount of goals scored as Juve. Less goals conceded than Juve, still below them in the standings. We beat them head to head, still below them in the standings. We only have 3 more goals conceded than Roma, and somehow we're still 10 points and 7 places behind them. So if Lazio had any semblance of goal scoring, and I'm sure you guys feel this about Milan to a certain extent in certain games, if either of these teams have a striker that you could depend on, I'm talking about a guy that scores 15 goals in the season.
It's not a high bar. Not a high bar.
We're not asking for a lot. These standings look a whole lot different. And, I mean, Serie A is just wild this year, but that's really the clear frustration for me. Like you mentioned they've been contentious games. Who's scoring a goal for Lazio in this game? Like maybe there's a draw, but who's doing it? I
think Zaccagni has to do everything he can with a favorable matchup. Like we're saying here, if this right side of Milan is just very different dynamically, Saelemaekers is huge for this. If Saelemaekers can make this match, I think it changes the entire thing. But if that's not the case and there's a favorable matchup, say it's Tomori, say it's the Winter at the right back position, right wing back, Zaccagni has to do something. Like, he has to be able to take advantage of that, because if you're trying to be on the Italian national team, if you're really pretty much the captain or de facto one, if he's not truly that, I don't know who it is at this point. These are the kind of games where you have to put in at least a good shift, at least something warranting, a threat of how Milan and Allegri are going to combat that. And that's just for the Serie A fixture. As far as like Coppa Italia, I always find it so interesting as to how a manager like Sarri at a club like Lazio, considering what he has to work with, how do you approach this? What is the game that you are sitting there saying, yeah, we have to go in for this? If I'm Lazio, you gotta pick your poison here.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
with these two fixtures, because it also, you don't have that favorable of a schedule after this. It looks like a couple of tough fixtures, in my opinion. Bologna is difficult, obviously. Parma, regardless of where they are in the standings, that's not easy. Cremonese has been really difficult for a lot of teams this year. And then Udinese to finish out the year. And then obviously when you head into the new year, it is like relatively difficult. We'll see how Fiorentina does. Yeah, like Sarri's got to make a point here, because I know what you're saying with fighting for a trophy. I don't know, man. Like that's difficult, and not to even mention Milan, Matt. Supercoppa is going to be happening mid-December, so even on top of that, Allegri has to make these decisions. If neither are ready to go, these two players right here, I think Allegri has to make an aggressive decision of Nkunku getting in there and then just trying something, with a De Winter at the right wing back spot.
I could see them also, because they actually they're in a bit of a luxury position, and it's crazy to think that Milan is in a luxury position when it comes to midfielders. But truthfully, look at the names they've had in the midfield. Yeah. I think they're not in a position with these injuries and potential injuries going into these two games to go with two wingbacks. I think you actually might see maybe like a flat 4-3-3. They go three midfielders. They play maybe like Leao. They try to go maybe two guys on the left and right. And again, I don't have the names that I would go in front of me, but like playing Leao and Nkunku in a two-strike formation, and then you don't obviously have potentially Saelemaekers, and then also you don't have Atacama. Like you're got so many guys that I think trying to shoehorn into a 3-5-2 is a bit of a risk, because Lazio, for all the issues they've had scoring goals, like they're professionals. This is a professional football team. Like we've conceded goals against far worse competition. So that's the way I look at it. Is I think like because of these injuries, Allegri might need to go with a different formation approach. I also, looking ahead, wonder if, yes, we're not in the Champions League, and you mentioned the game against the Super Cup coming up as well. With all these injuries kind of piling up, does this sort of scenario in this phase of the season with the injuries Milan are facing and have been facing kind of intermittently, does it kind of force management's hand to kind of maybe be a little bit more aggressive than normal in January? Because the last thing you want to do is say, hey, the only thing we need to go after is a striker. You maybe get that. You have to see if the player that you do get potentially has to adapt, but you're one or two injuries from potentially throwing away a Scudetto if you don't handle this carefully. So I think that these games with Milan having some injuries and players getting banged up through a third of the season kind of begs a lot of questions about the long-term health and the long-term strength as far as their Scudetto hopes are concerned.
I mean, they invested a lot more with a far worse team last year. So like realistically, and their reasoning behind it was to make top four, because they knew how important that was. I know they moved around the books that they made a profit, so they don't have to be overly scared. I think, a sale of Jimenez would not shock me either. Obviously based off of like how he's been, the reports regarding, the relationship in terms of, Allegri liking him as a player. Like he can say everything publicly, right? Oh, I like how Santi works hard off the ball. Like people who bring that up really fail to understand that a manager is not going to publicly shit on a player like that, especially someone like Allegri, regardless if he likes him or not. Yeah, obviously he's not going to say that. One, that hurts the club in negotiations and leverage.
The director might.
Well, yeah, I mean, the director, Nick knows him better than us, going out and saying that prior to, I mean, it's just silly to kind of do that. And then, I just, and again, this isn't a sure thing that Saelemaekers and Pulisic will miss. They were just kind of reports today, like, like it's a little bit of fatigue. They might go lighter on in training. But yeah, to me, it's just about Milan moving forward and collecting 3 points at home against the side that they should. And that's realistically what it's going to come down to. Coppa Italia, I think, will just ultimately be what the situation calls for, who's available, who feels fully healthy, how do they feel heading into the fixture after that. Valentien, the kid that we've seen a little bit of, they've been calling up Milan Primavera, Futuro players as well. I mean, Bartesaghi was talking about how important playing for the Futuro was, regardless of how good they were, because they were terrible. In those developments, I think Allegri has to ultimately use these guys. Sala, Sia. There's plenty of other players. Like, do they get a look? Do they get like 20 minutes here or there? I don't think he's been that scared to make those moves if the situation calls for it. So, and then as Stupinian, I feel like you have to come in and put a good enough shift in matches like this, regardless of one of the two. Like, bro, you can't show up against Lazio and Coppa Italia after you play them twice in a week. Then you're no good here.
Yeah.
To be honest, like you could, there's the door as well come January. I'm willing to say that. So yeah, we could give predictions for this one if you guys want to do that. Or there was some other talking points that you want to bring up, but it just really kind of seems like both sides are in a little bit of the same pickle here as far as options go and quality of. Anything else before we go a prediction?
You guys hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, the Scudetto is there for the taking. Whether you believe it or not, it's there for the taking this year. You got Roma ahead of you, who can't stay healthy, who haven't figured out goal scoring yet. You've got Napoli, who's banged up as well. Not the same team. They really have not that many goals in them. McTominay, how many times could he save them over the course of 2 years? And then Inter, who you just beat head to head, we just talked about the jump of the show, right? They're in a little bit of a identity crisis. Why would you not make the moves you need to make? If you're a team like Milan, you should be making those moves every single year, regardless, right? Like you're one of the handful of clubs who can do it.
Because it comes back in like not tenfold, but you could come on, Milan having someone that you could you say you make an aggressive move. I don't think it's going to happen in January. Say Mateta from Palace. If anything, that would probably be in the summer. But that is sort of how do you not do that? It guarantees you into the Champions League. The prize for winning the league is still decent enough money for that. And then you head into next year with all this positivity and a core that you could build off of, on top of just buying your own stadium. Think of all the money that you could have if you're more aggressive and try and further yourselves into the Champions League, qualifying again, which almost gives you a guarantee. Because if you're riding out maybe Santi Jimenez could figure it out. What if he doesn't? Then what? Right? What just happened last year with them missing out top four? Because top four is a pretty close race right now. I think the packs will separate themselves over the course of time. We're only a third of the way through. To Nick's point, how does Roma combat injuries? How do they manage playing the tougher side?
Just got his first goal.
And
they expected a lot from him, right? So
they haven't beat anyone top.
Yeah, and I just want to again, I think that my final point, just kind of on a Milan level and as a whole, is I think when you bring in a coach like Allegri, I think that should signal some pretty clear intent as far as your club objective, but also a clear intent to the fans. If you're going to go and shell out whatever the yearly salary he's making, I think it's somewhere around 5 for him, and you're bringing a coach like Allegri, who is a serial winner when it comes to the domestic campaign and a lot of the domestic trophies, that should be reflected in the market. I'm not saying that they didn't have a good market. They didn't get some good players this past summer. I'm not saying that. But I think that has to have been some semblance in the conversation amongst Allegri and his entourage and Milan at the time of sitting down to talk about him becoming coach. You don't bring in a guy like Allegri and then you sort of get into January where you can kind of sniff the Scudetto, we're there, and not go for it. And at least show that intent to be we're not going to leave this to chance. We're not going to leave what we accomplished in the first half of the season and kind of rest on our laurels and just say, we're good with what we have. Milan have always been a team, at least in recent years, they've been tactically aggressive and a little shrewd. If they see an opportunity for a loan with their option, they might do it. But what I saw last January when they got Santi for that such large of a fee meant to me that they were, and then Ja Felix, it didn't work out, but like that signaled to me that there at least is some ambition there. Granted, it was misguided because obviously it failed and they waited 6 months for it to all play out.
Yeah,
But I think that they can't repeat that same mistake. That's my final point. You can't go into the January market with what we've seen so far that, yes, a team that is very good, a team that is much well drilled and much more drilled than it was last year because of that consistency on the bench. But this is a long season. If you go through a little bit of an injury crisis and you drop some key games, the Scudetto can be gone like that. Yeah. And I think that Milan have to be very careful with how they approach that market.
I think you're right, too, because we've seen the rumors and, the proof in the pudding with Allegri and his requests. Yeah. He asks for Rabiot. He gets Rabiot. He performs significantly well.
He's got the pull here.
And I know Dusan Vlahovic is probably one of the more divisive sort of strikers when it comes to conversations. Is he good? Is he not good? Like, is he a quality player? I think the consensus is very obviously that he's significantly overpaid.
They brought 2 other strikers. He's still the best one on the team.
By far. I think he's clearly that. And funnily enough, as bad and heavily criticized as he is, the goals are kind of there. Like, he's still producing. Like,
I mean, the goals are there when he plays Lecce and Pisa and Parma and Cagliari. I haven't seen the goals there elsewhere, but that's another topic.
Hey, but you know who can't beat those sides?
Right.
Milan.
So,
you mentioned he's on Parma right there. You mentioned 2 of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And then on top of it, Santi Jimenez has 0 goals.
Right.
And it's fairly, and I'm not saying that you go out and get Vlahovic, but like you have to listen to Allegri if he doesn't like this striker that you invested in. And it was funny because we talk about this all the time, and we'll finish before we move on to another thing that they botched regarding transfers, is that you knew Conceição was not staying for the most part, unless he pulled off something to get into the top 4, which was a long shot. You come in, you move around all these different players. The players are at war with the manager in the first place and the previous one. You don't have a sporting director. What is the direction here? Did Tare necessarily want to keep? It didn't even see like Nkunku was their guy, because Allegri's in the press conference saying, yeah, I don't know where I'm going to put him, to be honest with you. That's not a good sign. That's not a good thing. So why don't you get a guy that he likes, that he could plug and play? Regardless if, like, I don't think, guys, that they need to get a 20-goal scorer guy in here right now. They need somebody that is reliable enough within Serie A to do this. Like, Moise Kean is not walking through that door. Matete is not walking through that door. The question is, who can you get in that's savvy enough, that can get you enough goals that makes you say, okay, we could push for this? Because ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to. As good as Leao and Pulisic are, they're still wingers at the end of the day, creative types.
You know who's one name, not to make
go for it.
Discussion, but one name that even in the summer that I was
Bonetti brought up, or no?
No, I don't think he brought up, that I was thinking that he was linked with the potential move away, was Mitrovic.
Right. Yeah, but that's a big salary.
I'm not saying maybe exactly him, but like since he's even left the Premier League, I mean, granted, he's been in the Saudi Arabian League, so it's not the highest competition. He's still putting up like ridiculous numbers. And
how old is he now?
He is 31.
Oh, so
like,
younger than I thought.
So like, I think someone in that like profile age bracket, and I tweeted this out, and it's gotten some pretty good traction. That's where Milan, at least in recent memory, have succeeded. They haven't succeeded in buying the young striker for 35 million, 30 million, or the young forward. And like they spent for kind of 5 million on Lasitic, that Serbian kid. I haven't seen him play. I don't think he plays football anymore. They got Piontek, they got Santi Jimenez, but Giroud, Ibrahimovic, years ago, Baca, guys that have like the veteran mold. It doesn't have to be sexy. It could be a guy that even Ante Rebic.
Well, Bonetti, the one that I was bringing up, Bonetti mentioned Duvan Zapata.
Oh yeah, I know he banged on that drop. He's like, he's available for free. Pick him up. And I'm like, yes.
I mean, this is all down to like. I know Fulkrug was a name that was floated out there as well.
Another dude that's older though,
Yeah,
I like him, but
yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's just this is like Milan's indecisiveness over the years on like who they want, where they want them, who's going to fit. Do they fit with the manager? Do they fit with the players that they have around them? That's like That's like the thing. When are you being decisive enough? Because now you have Nkunku and Santi Jimenez, which you round up to 75 million euro in cost. Even though Santi, it looks like, I know there were bonuses that would get him up to 35. If not, I think it stays around 28. So that's probably why their aggressiveness in January is likely to happen. Because if you get a figure in back for 30, you know how these accounting numbers work, guys, better than I do. They're going to be like, okay, well, realistically, we didn't actually lose money because we didn't have to pay Feyenoord the 35 million because he wasn't here getting those appearances and goals at the same time. So we're essentially cutting our losses, which is closer to breaking even or essentially a profit, depending on how the books work in this stupid sport. I think that's where they move swiftly because 0 goals off of 7 big chances created. Like,
and they're 2 points off and they're 2 points off the top. But how sustainable is that over 38 match days is the question, right?
Yeah, but it's just, I think when you have Pulisic and Leao and the way they're playing, it's not, for me, it should be like what Nick is saying. They should be very clearly first place. And if you don't make a move that clearly puts you in first place, then that's malpractice. Because like that shouldn't be the case. We're not talking about like a summer with the Chinese in 2017 where you have $250 million in where you haven't qualified for Euro. Like, you're likely to make the Champions League. It guarantees you Champions League if you get a decent enough striker. Forget about the title for a bit, right? You're guaranteeing finances. On top of that, you have a much better chance at the title. It's just, do they understand the moment and in the situation that they're in, much like what Maldini mentioned? And something that signifies that they don't really get it is this Maignan shit. On the table, 5 million net. I don't care what the poor form was. That was plenty. And I know people are just sitting there. And Nick, I know you and I agree on this. And why I always laugh at Serie A fans saying, oh, 5 million is too much for a goalkeeper. No. You're looking at it all wrong. Mike Maignan is one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And you're getting him for 5 million net when he could go to a top team in England or many other places that would pay him more. Relative to all the other goalkeepers in the world, that's where you stack up his salary. It's not a Serie A thing. It's a world thing because he's one of the best in the world. Like Leao, you're getting him for a great price relative to what a lot of other players in other leagues get, specifically the Premier League. You're telling me you could have got one of the best goalkeepers in the world only for 5 million net? That's nothing. You were paying Donnarumma that more years ago. So why can't you do that now? And he's clearly proving that. But they rescinded the offer, according to multiple reports. Furlani was the one who did this. And Maignan was so frustrated and pissed off by it that he doesn't want to renegotiate. He doesn't want to stay because obviously Furlani's the CEO. They prevented him from going to Chelsea because it really seemed like he wanted to go there over the summer, but Chelsea wouldn't meet the fee that was required. I think it was around 30 million, but they didn't want to do that 1 year left with the goalkeepers that they have in their squad. And now we're sitting here listening to reports today that Chelsea are going to negotiate in January when you can do that prior to a player being a free agent with 6 months left on their contract. And Milan, once again, losing a top-class goalkeeper, or at the very worst, a top 5 goalkeeper in the world for free. Something that they sacked the previous director for doing. One of the reasons that they were using, for example. So now we're sitting here doing the same thing. How are they going to replace a top-class goalkeeper? How inexcusable is this from the outside looking in, Nick?
Completely inexcusable. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a position where there's very few who are in a category of top in the world, right? And it's going to cost you $1 million a season, $2 million a season, maybe after everything to keep them happy. That doesn't make much sense to me because the alternative is you're going to go and either overspend on somebody who's not as good or correctly spend on somebody who's just average and pay them $2-3 million a season anyway. This is a guy who has won games for you, that will win games.
Literally just
look top. I mean, look at Sommer for Inter. What's he getting paid? He must be getting paid close to that, and he's been terrible for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
What's your alternative? Who you're going out and getting and replacing him with that's keeping you at this
level? They were lucky enough to replace Donnarumma with him. So 100%. What are they do it again? Talk about unsustainability?
No, it doesn't make sense to me. And you made an interesting, I'm sorry, I know the segment's about Maignan. You made an interesting point about Leao. Look at what Leao's getting paid relative to players in his position that like people sweat, right? Vinny Jr., who's a head case, Cody Gakpo, guys like that who are probably who are making way more money and their output's not any better.
Luis Diaz, how much better is he than Leao relative to league and output? Not much better.
So
if that.
I think overwhelmingly Milan's done good business. This would be very good business to keep him. I just don't know enough behind the scenes on if he wants to go, why he wants to go, what it gets into any. We've given players so much power, like over the past 5 years or so, to just demand what they demand, and clubs are starting to pay all these fees. And I don't know what you can do if he wants to go. It's really, really unfortunate, but I also don't understand why he wants to go.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
So, yeah, I mean, the situation is interesting with Mike, because I think that, this would be presumably the second big player from that Scudetto winning team that would leave due to contract dispute, right? And I hate to keep, reflecting back on Maldini and Mazzara and the way things were under their watch. But I asked myself, okay, when you're looking at this from a bird's eye view, and you're looking at how a lot of these negotiations are playing out, I'm not saying Pulisic is going to walk out the door. I'm not saying Rafa's going to walk out the door, but other players at this club that are maybe in that next phase of their career looking for their contract, are they going to look at Milan and the way they do business when it comes to contract renewals a little bit differently? Because Theo committed to Milan for the amount of years he did under Maldini, making, to Nick's point, like what, 4 million, right? 4 million on the contract.
Best in the world.
Committed to the project. And I'm not saying a lot of these guys are not committed to the project. Modric has spoken so highly of the club and so many other players. But I look at it and think to myself, this could have been handled much, much more different. And I think their lessons aren't being learned when it comes to these renewals. And I agree with both of you guys. Like, there are other good goalkeepers out there. I'm not saying that Milan can't go and go through their Rolodex and go through their algorithms and this guy's good. Something from some Norwegian country.
I do not want Suzuki, man.
Right. And you look at it and you're like, okay, fine. He could be good from a technical standpoint, but there is something to be said about a player that's proven it at a big club with a lot of pressure, multiple big clubs. He was at PSG, didn't play a ton there, won with Lille. He's been France's number one. That has value. I know everyone will look at the performances and this and that and what have you. Captain. He's 30. He has proven, I know there's a whole he's injury prone thing around him. He's proven to be pretty healthy the past couple of years. So that whole narrative about, well, I wouldn't maybe give him a new deal because he's injury prone and he needs to prove he could stay healthy before we do it. He's been playing pretty much every single game. And that's reflective in the fact that we haven't had to see Sportiello and some of these guys that often. So on top of the fact that he's been playing consistent, he's showing you that into his age 30 season.
Yeah.
And he's asking for wages that are, again, pretty reasonable.
They're incredibly reasonable, man.
I look at everything and think to myself, what's the cost of a guy that's proven all this, that has accomplished so much at this club? It is 30 and is your captain and is the guy that is the mouthpiece leading everything from the back in the end goal. That has value to me. That is value. That should have value to the club. That has value to the fan base. But everyone looks at everything so differently when they come to say, he's this age, we need to get a new younger keeper, we could pay him less. You look at the goalkeepers in Serie A, name the best 2 or 3 and ask me what they're getting paid. I know Svilar just renewed, right? He's getting paid, what, 4? Something around 4? Mike Mignon's accomplished a hell of a lot more than he has. At the club. At this club, he's won a title here. He's France's number 1. So, again, like, there's that, but then there's also my final point here, from Mike's standpoint, thinking, hey, I could have taken more money somewhere. I could have hooted and hollered, pouted, I want 10 million or I'm leaving.
Yeah.
He was willing to stay for 5 million. He was like, I'm in. The moment he started having some bad form, they rug pulled him. And now if you're a player, how does that make you feel? Right. Because I'm all in, I'm committed to you. I was willing to take less than what the market probably would give me. And now you're backing out? And now you want to do again?
And it's incredibly stupid too, because even the Champions League fixture where he had it rough, he had stretches previous years that he was far worse in and looked terrible. And that didn't stop them from offering the initial 5. And so all of a sudden, after a couple bad matches, after the 5 million was offered, you then rescind that after a verbal agreement. How in any way, shape, or form do you expect a player to have good faith with you going into the negotiation? Oh, wait, actually, sorry, we didn't mean to. What do you mean? Like you're making decisions on a whim. We've seen it in January where they're just like, oh, Morata, no good. This, no good. Fonseca, yeah, we hired you for a few years. No, thank you. Oh, Conce said, we'll have you in, but we don't know if we're going to keep you for the long term. That all goes back to someone who has zero fucking experience in this. And that's what happens. And hopefully Tade can't mend a relationship that's fractured at that point.
Yeah.
Like he could say and do all he wants. If the guy felt slighted multiple times, why should he stay with you? Because at that point, he's like, all right, fuck it, fine. I'll go to the Premier League. I'll go play for Chelsea. It's a huge step up in terms of money. So why am I staying here for you when you don't value me? Or when you do value me, it's after the fact that someone told you to. So I get where he's coming from. This is the CEO's fault, clearly. And I'm sorry. Other people were fired for less. So where are the standards at? I think it's a disgrace, and like how this guy's allowed to do this, and there's no severe repercussions, especially after you finish 8th. It's disgraceful. Losing another top goalkeeper like this is just dumb. Expecting to replace someone of his caliber is dumb. And also like going out there and seeing some of the options. The only one that I really kind of like that I've seen so far is Caprile, and that's it. All the other names to me are subpar. Suzuki's not good enough. Like, sorry, every time I watch that guy, it's some boneheaded mistake that should never happen for a goalkeeper at that level, especially when Parma's asking for like 30 million for him. Get out of my face with that. And Milan do have young goalkeepers in the wing like Torriani, Longoni. Hello, if we're trying to get back into the Champions League, why are we going to potentially rely upon young goalkeepers? That's insane. Outside of center backs, that's probably the one position where it's really difficult to find someone that you could plug and play at that age. How many young top goalkeepers? Like Donnarumma is a once in a century type of kid. Like it's like that doesn't happen. We knew how incredible he was. Like there's differences in this, and I just think Milan are silly for that. And so yeah. But Nick, we want to thank you so much for coming on Kicks and Picks podcast. It's great with you, Scotty, Coach Steve. Give a little background for some of the folks before we head on out here, because you guys go live every single week.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on as always. Great time. Wishing you both a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. But yeah, Kicks and Picks pod. Weekly shows, we cover Serie A and the Premier League from a betting standpoint. So typically we're going live on Wednesday nights. Depends on schedule. Could be Thursday as well.
You guys going live tonight?
We went live last night. We had a schedule conflict, but pretty laid back, loose show. Just try to give some betting nuggets, try to get some guests involved, chat going on. But if you're into betting at all, appreciate you guys giving us a try.
Yes, absolutely. Matt and I have both been guests on there before and always have a lot of fun. So yeah, we appreciate you coming on. Best of luck with your picks today, with the games that are going to be kicking off in like 25 minutes.
Bayern Munich team total. I'm going to hit you with it. Right?
Well, no one's going to be able to see that, but
you're going to either tell me I'm really smart or
give him credit in the comments section once this is up. Yes, and then again, go and follow Nick at Nick Diani. Again, Sant'Angelo, everyone can go and find you here. Just give a couple other notes regarding that and the content. Your Instagram as well.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at Matt_Santa22. I have like 140 followers, which is crazy that I have 140 people that want to follow my Instagram. Awkwardness when it comes to creating content. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to get better on the editing side. I'm seeing a bunch of creators like Martino, like Nick and Lex and Sharma, Kush. Like, you guys are just superstars when it comes to this stuff, I feel. So I'm trying to like emulate you guys and take inspiration from what you guys do. But yeah, anything on Instagram at Matt_Santa22.
Yep. And again, all of our stuff is at That Milan Podcast, at That Milan Pod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We've been growing really well on those video platforms. So we appreciate all the help regarding that. And again, all of our guests, we appreciate it. You can follow me everywhere at Martino Puccio, Martino_Puccio. Some Mets stuff as well. There's going to be more baseball, sports, American sports things from me on my personals, because I prefer that over some of this sport, to be honest with you guys. So you guys can go and check that out over there. But we appreciate all the support, guys like Nick and everyone else in the Serie A community. Always great to talk to and chat with, especially when they understand betting terms. So we appreciate you so much for coming on here. And other than that, we will see you guys next week.